Christopher Rosen with Gold Derby. I'm so pleased to be joined by Rita Wilson and Friedrich Wickstrom, the producers of A Man Called Otto. Great new film starring Tom Hanks, coming out on Christmas and then later in January with a wider release. Rita, I wanted to start with you. What was it about? I know you read the book and saw the original adaptation. What was it about the story that you felt made it right for an Americanized version of the project, I guess?
Mostly it's a visceral experience. Like, I literally read something or see something and I feel like, oh my God, I've got to make this happen somehow. Because to me, it's really about what was going on in our country at that time. This is a story about someone who is apparently a person who you would never want to hang out with and never want to be with. But what I loved about the story was it was more about how similar we are than about how different we are. And one of the things that I loved when Frederick Backman, the author of A Man Called Otto, came to the set was he said people come up to him all the time and they say, wow, I really love how Otto changes at the end of the movie. And Frederick said, Otto never changes. He is the person that is the same, but everyone's perception about him changes. And to me, that was really an important element because we do judge people, whether we like it or not. And this was a way to sort of show that there are people out there that are very different than what they present outwardly. And to me, it's more about acceptance of everyone. Let's do the things that unite us and not separate us.
Yeah, it's definitely like if you get to know your neighbors kind of thing, like you'll maybe learn something about them that you hadn't realized. And that's like really a great message, especially nowadays when we're all kind of more isolated than we've maybe ever been. So that's like really kind of cool.
And also having a neighbor, I grew up, I'm a first generation American. So having a neighbor that was not born in America, who now is in this person's life, I really related to that because I could see that my parents had accents and sometimes people treated them differently. And sometimes they were, struggling a little bit to fit in. And I really understood that in a way, but also they were incredibly warm people, incredibly loving people, and pure, and that's, I think, what Marcel and Tommy bring to the story.
Yeah, really, really great. Frederick, you produced the original adaptation for Sweden. It's a big success, obviously Oscar nominated and stuff, and then now the American version as well. Can you talk a little about like why did you, like, I guess it's kind of the same question for you, but why did you think it needed or warranted an Americanized version, I guess, after having the success with the Swedish version?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I've been asked, like, shouldn't you stop while you're ahead? The Swedish version was really good. Maybe why risk it and not making another version? And of course, we want to make something that is as good or better if we do this version. But I think for me, it's been very much the driving force, like it's been for Rita and Tom and everyone, that we want to convey the message of the film. That's been,
right.
And when you make a film in Swedish, a small film, you can reach a certain audience in your home country or in certain specialty screenings in other countries. But this was a chance to make, the themes about unity, about hope. Otto is a character who goes through a lot of hardship, and life isn't easy on him. And he, what Sonia says to him about either you're busy dying or you start living. That message about a life-affirming, hopeful story, and the unity theme that Rita spoke about is something that I've just been so passionate about, trying to give that to a global audience and making this film on this scale with Tom Hanks. Of course, we have a chance to communicate to a global audience in a way we could never have done with the Swedish film.
I think
definitely,
it's important.
And obviously, yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's important what people choose to put out in the world in terms of material, right? We all have our lanes that we love, and for me, this lane of joy and hope and acceptance and being able to laugh, being able to cry, the human experience and the human connection, I really related to that in the book and in the Swedish film.
Yeah,
and I think that was something that kept the whole, when we developed the American version, it really unified everyone in the project. We were so
Yeah.
on board with why we wanted to tell the story in this way. So the development process was actually super great and super efficient. We were so aligned with these themes and what we wanted to do with the story.
Completely, like
Yeah.
Dave McGee sent us the first draft, and I said, Frederick, this never happens. We loved the first draft. It was like, you don't understand. This never happens. And we were so lucky. And I really thought, Dave McGee, as a writer, I've always responded to what he can pull off in terms of adaptations, but also in terms of that beautiful sensitivity he has, and bringing humor and bringing humanity to his screenplays. That was so important. And then when Marc came on board and they had worked together on Finding Neverland, that was already a genius sort of combination. But I loved what Marc did in Stranger Than Fiction, because that comedy was so real and so grounded and so authentic that that's what we were looking for. Something that was super, believable.
Right. And that's interesting, the Stranger Fiction. I thought of that too, actually, watching a little bit, right? Because you mentioned, obviously, Frederick, you mentioned having Tom Hanks in this movie is an incredible boon for getting people to pay attention to it, because he's like one of the biggest movie stars in the last 50 years or whatever. And obviously he's incredibly talented. Rita, I think I read this in the press notes, but just watching it too, it's like, not Tom Hanks is very funny as an actor, not necessarily gotten to do that so much in recent years because of all the great dramas he's done that I don't need to go through. But I guess, is that something where you like, oh man, like, was that something like you guys would talk about as like something that maybe he would love to do again, like a comedy kind of style? Like, obviously this has drama elements too, but it is very funny, and he is so funny and quick, and his physical comedy, even with the way he holds himself, is so funny. And all of this is just like, it was a delight to see as a fan of his work. So I guess I would love to know how you guys kind of think about that and like talk about it.
It's absolutely true. We would have many discussions about that. I'm like, you haven't done a comedy. Why haven't you done a comedy since like the golden days of, Nora Ephron and romantic comedies? He goes, well, I can't do romantic comedy. Nobody makes them, and I'm too old for that. And he said, I'm not really into doing something like a buddy comedy. So it has to be the right kind of material that would enable, him to be able to, it has to be about something deeper than just, a broad comedy. And I'll never forget when we saw the Swedish film. 20 minutes in, I had that panic moment of like, this is the one. And the next day, I believe we made the call to Frederick to, come and have a meeting or figure a way to get the rights to it, because I just thought this is the perfect role for him.
Yeah, so I remember that so clearly. I was in LA because I was trying to figure out a way to set up the American version. I was having meetings with studios and producers who were interested in financiers, etc. And I get this call from Richard Lovett from CIA, who says, "Yeah, I'm hearing you're trying to put together this movie. So do you have a director yet?" No, I'm having meetings, but nothing. Yeah, because I have a client here who's interested in playing in the movie. Yeah, who's that? Tom Hanks. All right, trying to pretend like that happens every day. That's cool. And then we met the day after, and we hit it off, and then we developed it together from that time. It was a big phone call. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely worked out. I mean,
yeah.
You're talking. You guys are both producers, obviously, and like you mentioned there, and like this is not the comedies and stuff like this is not necessarily getting made as much, right? And to have this be, I was like heartened, being like, oh, this is like a theatrical, a real movie, right? Like it's going to go in theaters, and like people are, I think, hopefully going to pay attention to it and stuff. I mean, I'd imagine that's very heartening to have this exist and like be out there, but it's also frustrating that it seems like it's rarer and rarer in the industry to see kind of projects like this come together.
It is increasingly more rare, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people don't want to see them. It really is a matter of like, thankfully, we were able to make this movie the way we wanted to make it. And that doesn't often happen either. But I think if you give people something that they like and it's successful, there might be more of that. And, I mean, there's a formula to the things that we're seeing now. And I think people go because they're entertaining on some level. and there's a place for all movies in the world, but I really do believe that this movie it's a universal theme, and it's a universal, I believe it connects in that way. That's why the book sold 44, how many million copies?
No, it sold 8 million copies.
8 million,
but
8 million.
44
huge.
languages,
Yeah.
77 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. You know, there's a reason why the story resonates with people, because it, you know, even in things like Greek Wedding, you know, seeing that play in a 99-seat theater and thinking, I love this. It's so funny. I relate to it. I sometimes think in the specificity of a story is where you find all the universality.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kind of say this cranky, mean old guy in this movie, I can't stand him. And then you realize, oh, I know that guy, or that guy's my dad or my uncle or my brother or whatever. It becomes something that now you're engaged in because you feel you know that person in your life.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we in Sweden, it's a Swedish novel, obviously, the first, and we see the story as a very Swedish character, a very Swedish story. And then the book has become a huge bestseller. The US is the biggest territory for the book. And I think readers here have more read it like an American story rather than a Swedish story. And now
That's
the book
true.
is selling like crazy in China. It's a huge bestseller
Really?
in China. And
Wow.
I bet that they read it like a Chinese character,
Right.
because I don't imagine they're not really interested in Swedish characters like that. So it's something with this character and the themes of the story that just is, as you say, transcends. It becomes universal.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
and that was one of the reasons why we also said we wanted to make a film that was very, very American. We didn't want to have a Nordic Scandinavian flavor to it. We wanted to really make it, if you hadn't read it or seen the original film, it should feel like a totally American story.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
I
like
think,
for example, oh, go ahead. Sorry,
No,
Chris.
you go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, I think it does. Well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah.
I was going to say one of the challenges was, and you would think that this would be a no-brainer, was finding the right neighborhood, because it's written very specifically in a very, you know, there's a very unique neighborhood in Sweden that feels like this. There are many of them, but it was hard to find the right neighborhood that would communicate how everybody could sort of be in everybody's business and know what's going on and still feel like it was from the right period and the right era. And so I think that also was something that I really love, that idea that there's tradition and there are roots and there are places and neighborhoods that have existed for a really long time, and then they're being encroached upon by developers and people that are saying, we don't need that old stuff. In a way, it's like saying we don't need old people. We can discard anybody. We're just all about the new. And so I feel that way. I think there's something to be valued in the things that have existed for a while, and that not everything has to be new all the time.
And I think that's one of the key themes of the story as well, about that generational gap.
Yes.
And I think what, you know, the point of the story isn't always that the old is better than the new, or vice versa. It's about overcoming that gap and seeing the value in maybe the values of older generations, but also the, you know, the new generations, and that there is something about that as well that is probably better. So that's of course, I think, one of those universal themes that engages everyone.
Definitely. And I mean, I think you see that in the movie. I mean, the characters are like, a thing I liked about it is that they're even like the generation gaps are there, but they're communicating with each other, right? And like trying to understand each other instead of being very closed-minded about it, which I thought was like really touching and good. We have to wrap up here shortly, but Rita, and obviously you have this beautiful original song as well in the movie. And I guess, can you talk a little about, like, and I know you're obviously a singer as well in real life and all these things, so it's not like just like out of the blue, but I guess, how did you decide you wanted to contribute the song to the film, and like what went into that kind of decision making?
It was a complete shock and a complete surprise. I'll never forget it. We were sitting around one of our meetings with Marc Forster, our director, and he turned to me and he said, I think you should write a song for this movie. And it was very specific because the song was going to be used in the scene in the garage. And I didn't know what to say at first, because what was going through my mind was, oh my God, I'd love to write this song, but what if he hates it? And then I'm the producer, and then he has to tell me he doesn't like the song. And so I was like trying to circumvent all of that. And I was like quiet. And then I said to Marc, I'd be honored to write the song, but you have to promise me that if you don't like it, you can tell me and you can be honest. I don't ever want to have any discomfort between us, because this was before we were working. He wanted the song written so that he could use it in the playback. And I said, I don't ever want to be in a position where you feel awkward around, having to reject something. And I said, well, if we're cool, if you don't like it, we'll write another one, or we'll find somebody else to write the perfect song, but let's just go one step at a time. And it was really an exhilarating experience, because writing for a film is, you don't want it to be super spot on. Like it has to be sort of vague, in my opinion, but it also has to communicate what thematically is going on in the movie, and have it be evocative in a way. And I wanted it to be, when my dad died, somebody said to me, the conversation continues. And sort of that approach of sort of being able to have a conversation with someone, even if they're not in the room, even if they've gone to another life, that conversation still continues. And I could imagine that Otto would be having that conversation about, or wanting to have certain things that he could say to her, like, wait till you meet these new neighbors. And, I can't believe what just happened today, and some idiot did XYZ. So it was really being able to sort of find that place that the song could sit emotionally in the movie, and that could feel real. And then at the end, because David Hodges, my co-writer, sings it in the body of the film. And then at the end, with the end credits, I felt like there was a way to sort of have Sonia be a part of the song in a way. So there's that female vocal. And then of course, Sebastian Yatra, who is an incredible singer-songwriter from Columbia. For me, it was a way to bring Marisol and Tommy into the song as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it really works well in the movie. And like, I think what you're saying too, a high degree of difficulty having to have to fit so well in the movie, and it does. I think it's just a beautiful track. We have to wrap up there, but Rita Wilson and Frederick Wickstrom, the producers of A Man Called Otto, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.